All right, welcome to the Mile High Market Brief. And Russ Nolting is on assignment right now. So, my name is Charles Coleman. I am your regional tech trainer. And let's dive into this thing. And the first one, let's talk about the NAR Commission lawsuit. So, there is an update that maybe not necessarily an update, and yet it came from the Denver Business Journal. And so it reads that there is over 2.7 million claims that have been filed in the NAR Commission lawsuit. All right. And there's still no payments that have been made yet because they're all still being reviewed by the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals. Now, what it's doing is we're seeing these plaintiffs are arguing that the buyer agent commission, right? We all understood this. It was artificially created and that it kept this ceiling on here that they believe that it was antitrust, right? So we went through this NAR Commission lawsuit, and when we're looking at this, we understand that NAR went through and they paid $418 million, Home Services of America 250, KW 90 million, and 83.5 million from Anywhere. Now, what's interesting is as we're going through here, what's happening is the payouts are being delayed. And there's a lot of people that are popping up right now that are saying that the attorney fees are too high and that the consumers actually aren't really getting anything back in the term of damages or anything like that. So what we saw is what we're going to continue to see is they're going to go through and they're going to figure out like what needs to happen. They've sent 138 million emails out. They've sent over 400 or 44 million postcards. And they're going out and they're doing a lot of stuff to go through and see like, okay, well, what do we need to do? What's interesting is if you go down to this bottom bullet point, it says that homeowners should not expect any large checks. One real estate attorney estimated that they're going to be anywhere between 10 and $50. All right, so we went through the NAR Commission lawsuit. The NAR Commission lawsuit went through and it said that real estate agents, again, were charging these fees that are astronomical. I think at one point we got called junk fees by the previous administration. And then when we go through and we look at this thing has fundamentally changed how we do real estate business, right? If we were to think about it at a national level, what they go through and they do is they have to have a touring agreement. So there's a touring agreement that has gone into place, and before that they can actually go show them a home in other states, that they actually have to have a signed document that says, hey, just want to let you know that if we find your dream home through this search, you will owe me compensation. The other thing that we saw was that they went in and in the MLS no longer discloses compensation. All right, so now compensation is now entered into the contract, and we have another mechanism to where it's no longer viewed in the MLS level. Now, in Colorado, it's a little bit different. We still have the MLS rules to where there is no more blanket offers of compensation. And yet, in Colorado, with the settlement, the way that the settlement was written and the way that it was interpreted in Colorado was it went against Colorado law. And so in Colorado, we actually do not go through and offer a touring agreement because we're what's called a transaction broker without a agreement in place as an agency. Remember, in Colorado, you're a transaction broker unless you have it in writing that you are someone's agent. And we are one of the only states in the United States that actually has that rule. So this is going to get interesting as we go through and we play this thing out. This has been years now at this point. There is still no payout. Colorado real estate, as well as the rest of the nation, has fundamentally changed how we do business. And with all of these dollars going around, the consumers can expect anywhere from $10 to $50, and real estate practice has fundamentally changed. So going on, wanted to bring this one in too because I was out at other market centers in the Southwest region last week, and I actually had some agents ask me about this as this was kind of breaking, and so I thought that, you know what, let's bring it to this call today. And so what we see is it says Compass joins the American Real Estate Association. And when we're going through and looking at this, again, this popped up because of the last article. There was some feelings around how NAR went through and represented their customers, us, through this commission lawsuit. And we had a organization pop up from this American Real Estate Association. Well, I think prior to last week, this association had something like 30,000 members, which, I mean, isn't small at the end of the day when we're looking at this. And this is not one of the associations where it is mandatory opt-in when you see a lot of this, right? Because there's other states outside of Colorado that where you have to be a part of the association because the association owns the MLS. Well, in Colorado, that's not how it is. Actually, it's a third-party entity at this point that owns at least already Colorado. And so when we're going through and we're looking at this 30,000, I don't think is necessarily a small number. And I think it's closer to over 100,000 at this point with this news article that has broken. And it says Compass is joining the American Real Estate Association and it's going to give the agents access to it at least until the end of 2027. All right. And so when I look at this, I think, okay, they must need this time to make sure that they're able to offer value over the next year and a half so that they can understand what the pros and the cons are versus NAR. And it's probably going to be a side by side comparison, I would assume. Because again, there's states where you have to be a part of the MLS, and to be a part of the MLS, you actually have to be a part of NAR to get access to it. And so when I look at this, what I'm assuming is they're going to have their NAR access so they can be a part of the MLS. And now they're going to also have a run with this American Real Estate Association. NAR did respond to this and they said, listen, you know what? We have a big advocacy win with the Road Act, right? This 21st Century Road to Housing Act, which has gone through. And remember, we've covered this and we've had conversations, and this is around how they are going to streamline processes and get rid of some of this red tape when it comes to building. And when we're also looking at this, more affordable housing, specifically in that under $100,000 sector, which we know doesn't impact Colorado, but there's other parts in the nation where this will absolutely have a huge impact going forward. So we'll kind of watch this as this goes through. I don't think this is major news, but again, I was getting asked about this last week. And so we'll kind of just play this from here. And yet, I think for this group to really do anything, remember that NAR, as this organization goes through, they are really throwing a lot of dollars, our dollars, these RPAC funds into pushing legislation, right? Filling these war coffers to make sure that they're actually able to go through and protect housing. And so that is one of the biggest reasons why a lot of us have our hands up and that participate with NAR, because again, Colorado is not a state that it's mandatory to be a part of it to get MLS access like other states. And yet we do understand that they are advocates for housing. And when we think about 1031 exchanges and some of the other things that they're doing, this is the main benefit to our consumers, which obviously has a direct impact on us as real estate agents as well. So again, I don't think this is necessarily big news, and yet we'll continue to watch it. All right. This I thought it was an interesting article as well when we're going in and we're looking, and it says foreign buyers purchased $45.3 billion in existing homes in the United States. All right, so National Association of Realtors went through and they said this is about 67,000 purchases from April 2025 until March of 2026. Now, this number was down 14% year over year. All right, so there has been a decline of 14%, and yet 67,000 purchases were made. And so, one of the things that we look at and we think about, even though this number is down, one of the interesting things that we go through and we look at it is that we understand that in the United States, we have pretty laxed uh, policies when it comes to migration into the United States. And we can look at this, right? And we can see, well, Canada, which actually has really steep regulation for purchasing properties inside of Canada when you are not a Canadian citizen, it said Canada led all countries by the number of homes purchased by 16%. So Canadians are coming into the United States. And keep in mind that one of the reasons why we're seeing a lot of people come in to the United States is because we have this 30-year fixed rate mortgage, which a lot of countries don't have any products, any loan products that look like this. It said Mexico was 14%, and then China led in the total volume amount, $7.6 billion dollars, and their average buying power on a purchase was $1 million. So when we look at this, it also says foreign buyers remain strong cash purchasers. All right, so we're looking at this and we're seeing 48% of all purchases that came in were cash. And in the United States, we saw only 28% of our buyers that were United States citizens purchase their properties in cash. We're looking at this very interesting. It says the median purchase price for a foreign buyer was $465,000 above overall US median at that $413,600. So we're going to look at this. We're going to keep monitoring this. This is a very interesting news article as well. When you look at the bottom, I just pulled this blurb out of Housing Wire, and it says resident foreign buyers. It says recent immigrants and non-immigrant visa holders living in the United States, that's your type B, accounted for 37,600 purchases. And then it says non-resident buyers, your type A, whose primary residence still remains abroad, was almost 30,000 homes. So again, we're looking at this and we're thinking about residential real estate in the United States still being an asset class, and we're still seeing people from other countries come into the United States to purchase real estate in the United States because they understand that there's going to be a return on their investment. All right. So, foreclosure activity. This was an article that is obviously important for numerous reasons. And when we look at this, it says foreclosure auction activity continues rising in Q2 2026. All right. So year over year, this number is up 23%. And when we're looking, it says it's reaching 66% of your pre-pandemic levels. So keep in mind, when we're looking at any real estate data, our safest dollars that or our safest numbers that we can compare to is always 2019. All right, anything pre-2019. Remember, 2020 we had a global pandemic. 2021 we had free money. 2022 we saw the interest rates go up at a velocity that we have never seen as a society before, and that's what spooked a lot of people. 23, 24, 25, and even 26, they've just stayed elevated. And so we do not consider anything a normal market until we get back to this pre-pandemic level. And we normally go back to 2019, but yet we're going to call it 2020 for the purpose of this article. So when we go through and we look a little bit more, it says the increase is being driven primarily by FHA insured mortgages. All right, well, that makes sense as well. When we're going through and we're looking at FHA, we understand that this is a lesser dollar down. And your typical demographic that is going to use an FHA is a less affluent buyer. All right, so this is no surprise to anyone on this call. So FHA has the highest foreclosure auction volume by type. Then we can go through and you can see USDA is actually the lowest. What's interesting is we go through and it says auction demand still remains strong. Buyers are purchasing more distressed properties, the seller lowering pricing, with foreclosure auction sale rates up 12% quarter over quarter. All right, so what we're just seeing is that we're seeing that still people are purchasing homes, And we are seeing an influx quarter over quarter, which again, that just probably means that we've come to the end of these NEDs. Well, it says Colorado remains one of the fastest growing foreclosure markets. All right, well, that should impact every last one of us on this call. So we should have all of our ears just perked up. And when we look at this, we know that we are that bottom square, that bottom red square on the map. And let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. Yep, there we go. Here you are, Colorado. The numbers are a little bit hazy, but when we look at this, when we're looking at our percentages versus Wyoming, we understand that our population is bigger than Wyoming. So even though their percentages is a little bit higher. So when we look at this year over year change, we're higher. And when we go through this, again, this is pre-pandemic levels. So as we're going in, we got to be thinking about, all right, so who is this affecting? Well, we're looking at this. It's FHA buyers. It's our less affluent FHA buyers. So then it's probably a demographic of where we can look at is a probably a younger couple, younger family, younger single buyer, somewhere along those lines. They probably had a less stable job because remember, this is one of the biggest things. Something happened, a life event happened, a negatively impacted life event went through their life and is causing them to no longer be able to pay their mortgage. And the bank has called the note due. So remember that a lot of these guys, something has happened to where there's so much equity in a lot of our residents' homes to where if they were to cash out, most of these things we would see short sell is that they're being forced to actually go sell the house, and then they're going to take that equity that they have in their home and they're going to move to the Midwest. But that's where this graph right here comes into play. This one, let's see if we can zoom in. This one's a little bit more interesting, and this should come to no surprise to anyone on this call. So we're talking about foreclosure auction. We look at pre-2000s, 1%. Well, be be thinking about this. These are all the people that have, I'm going to say like $1 million in equity in their house at this point, right? This is where we're looking at your 3,000 square foot homes were $300,000. Fast forward to today, they're now 1 million. All right. I know that's an overgeneralization over this, but I feel pretty safe about that. Also consider this if they're not refinancing, if they're not going through and they're not taking equity out of their home, well, they're almost up to their 30-year fixed rate mortgage at this 2000 level. But before, right, we're in 2026 now. So they have more equity. They're almost at the end of their balance of their loan. 2000, 2004, okay, we have 4%, but let's get all the way up to this 2022. Remember, this is when we saw people at the very end. Remember what happened with interest rates. Interest rates started low and then they skyrocketed. Again, it wasn't the dollar went up tremendous and the percentage. The issue was how quickly it went up and the music stopped. So when we're looking at this, this is where the vast majority of our foreclosures are coming from. So then when you go through and you look at this, you think of, okay, well, again, who's having to sell their home in a foreclosure situation? Well, someone that doesn't have equity in their home. Okay, that tracks in 2022 that they were expecting something to happen. Interest rates went up, and then we had this cooling period that we have lived in year over year. Remember, Colorado, we were seeing 10%. 10% appreciation year over year for a little bit. We would look back to historical levels since the 1990s, 4% year over year. Now we've been seeing 1%. And depending on what kind of FHA loan you got, you may have got a CHFA loan. You may have gotten a loan where you're automatically underwater as soon as you purchase this property. And so then let's factor in life events. They lose their job. Significant other that was the breadwinner passes away. Something happens negatively that impacts like this number does not surprise us as we're looking through this. I wonder how many of these foreclosures have second or third mortgages on them. Yeah, absolutely. At some point, when we're going through, this data doesn't point to this. And yet, at some point, the banks say, you know what? While we're not in the real estate business, this is too risky for us to continue playing. And as long as the banks are getting their money, they're okay with it. Even if I think we have underwater buyers, as long as the banks are still getting paid, they're not going to call those notes due. So it says this: overall, distress inventory is gradually increasing, but stronger homeowner equity, fixed rate mortgages, and tighter lending standards continue to make this look different than the great financial crisis. Remember what this looked like, the big short. I'm going to talk about it for forever. And so it's on Paramount Plus right now. And if you're curious on why today looks different than back then, go into the big short. Remember, they were going through and the mirror test. If you could fog the mirror, you can go get a mortgage and a second and a third. And yet today's difference is we have TILA and RESPA and everything else that came out of that crisis to where we have strong buyers. And that's why these numbers, as they're going up the way that they are, it's still a very, very minimal number in the grand scheme of things. And so, but again, I think this is also a reason to be reaching out to our people. If you helped someone during this time period, I would say it's probably time to reach out to them and make sure they're doing okay, right? Let's go through, let's do a care call. Hey, how are you? Right? The old Adele script to where we're going in, we're checking in on them, seeing how things are going, and just be that resource if they need us. Because now we know someone that bought in 2022 is a higher probability on someone that was an FHA buyer is a higher probability. And we're seeing an influx in Colorado versus what we have seen. So we have three indicators to where we can go back and look because we deal business in Colorado. We know who our buyers were. We know when they bought. It's probably worth a care call just to make sure that they're doing okay. And let's just pray that they're not in this list, but let's just make sure that we're reaching out. All right, now we're going to look at national data. Again, this is Logan Mohtashami. This is the lead analyst for Housing Wire. So we're going in and he says, listen, pending home sales are slightly higher than what they were last year despite mortgage rates. And we do have that at the very bottom, right? So what we can actually see is national inventory. This is where it gets interesting. So mortgage rates are around 6.83%. And this is what's truly slowing down buyer activity. Remember, this is not the housing crisis. This is we have an affordability issue, especially here in Colorado. You think about what our average price point is, you multiply that at your 6.83%, and that's going to slow some people down. We understand that the first-time home buyer is somewhere in their 40s now. And so improve mortgage spreads. We're not going to get into that. Wage growth continues to outpace home prices. I just don't know if it's big enough at this point. And it says inventory continues to improve, rising to 872,000. It's called 873,000 active listings. That's good. And yet, when we look at the inventory, it's only slightly up year over year. It says new listings remain below historical norms. So when we're looking at this, guys, this is also one of the reasons why we can actually go back and we can say, well, hey, when we are looking at these numbers and we can look at the data does not suggest that we are going to go have this housing crash, silver tsunami, Airbnb bust, that we're going to just see home prices dip and a bunch of inventory come up. Because again, keep in mind this, we're still seeing buyers. We just looked at a slide that says while they're down, they're still coming into the United States to purchase. Plus, we have US citizens that are still coming and purchasing real estate. They might be older, and yet, all of these factors are what is keeping our prices high. I think that I saw the Zillow economist came out earlier, I think it was this week, or the end of last week, and they are predicting about 1% growth. And we're seeing that over and over again. I think NAR came out and they said they're expecting 1% appreciation growth as well. So we'll continue to watch this, and yet we can look at it, purchase mortgage application data. I do like this graph, and I think this is one of the strongest indicators that we have to whether people are still looking to get into the market. So When we look at this, we're the black line right now. Red was last year, and we're still up over last year. So we understand that we're in a 90-day business. This is one of our consumers, hopefully not anyone on this call, that has reached out to a lender to figure out what they qualify for. Now, if this is someone on this call, hopefully they talk to you first, and then they called your preferred lender. And yet, if there's any doubt about this, again, these are the reasons why we're reaching out to people and figuring out where they are because we don't know when life is going to happen. And our job is to be in emotional proximity to people. So when they're thinking about transacting business, they're thinking about us. Even at interest rates being at 6.83%, we still have people trying to figure out what they qualify for. Keep in mind, asterisk, because this is also some refinancing. All right. Keep in mind, there's some refinancing data that is tied to this. And yet, these are still people that are looking and saying, hey, this might be a good time. So, looking ahead, this is actually this week because remember, this is a Friday article. We're going to watch mortgage rates, we're going to watch the Federal Reserve policy, employment data, and ongoing Iran conflict because when we look at employment data, we look at the Iran conflict, this both fits into the Fed dual mandate. The Fed dual mandate, they want to keep at a maximum number of Americans unemployed because that's really what it is. It's not a this is how many people employed. It's a this is what we're comfortable of unemployed Americans that want a job. And then they look at inflation data. Well, we understand that the conflict in Iran affects oil, which directly has an impact on stuff. So we're going to be looking at this. This could impact policy, and yet we don't think that the Fed's really going to necessarily drop anything going forward. And then accidental landlords. I thought this was an interesting article as well. This is directed at Colorado. And so it says accidental landlords are increasing. And I'm sure you guys have these in your ecosystems right now as well. We're looking through and it says Denver has the highest share of accidental landlords among the nation's 50 largest metro areas. So this is how they did this study. They went through and they were on Zillow and they watched homes that were on the market, then came off the market and turned into rentals on Zillow. This is where this data is coming from, just so that everyone's aware. And so the home was on the market, it sat, they didn't get their price, and they said, listen, I don't need to sell this home, right? We're hearing this, right? We get called, and the consumer says, well, I don't need to sell the home. Well, these are those people. They went through, they reached out to the real estate agent. The real estate agent gave them a figure. They said, hey, I'm comfortable with that figure. Or they told the real estate agent this is what their number is. And the real estate agent said, I need the business. I'll take it. They put the home on the market. They did the advertising. The advertising didn't get them where they wanted to. And they said, well, I'm going to take it off and I'm going to become a landlord. This is where they're seeing it. They're seeing it in Denver, Austin, Houston, San Antonio, Portland. These are the areas where we're seeing a rise in it. And yet we saw 5% of rental listings coming from homeowners who initially tried to sell in Colorado first. So the big thing that we need to know that as we're going through and we're doing this is that there are important tax implications if we have a consumer that says, hey, I'm going to do this because we know that your 3 out of your 5 year window when we're going in and we're looking has direct impacts on was this a primary residence versus was this an investment property? And we know there's tax implications, yet we are not their tax advisor. They need to talk to a CPA as they go through and do this. It says even if homeowners qualify for capital gains exclusion, they may still owe other taxes around depreciation and recapture. And so, very interesting conversation as we're going through and we're looking at this. And keep in mind, we're in a state where the laws favor buyers and the laws favor the tenants. So as we're going through and we're looking at these that are popping up, and if we had consumers, they might only want to be a landlord for 1 year until that noise level has become a distraction for them. So what are we doing to go through and to monitor all of these landlords that are popping up that are maybe not an LLC? Are we reaching out to our title companies of choice to go figure out who our absentee landlords are and to be reaching out to them to figure out how we can help them in the future when these leases expire and to see if this is something they want to re-roll again or if they want out of this and cash out on their properties, knowing the 3 out of 5 year rule. All right, everyone, that was the Be the Market, the brief today. Have a great rest of your day, and we will see you next time. Bye, everyone.